restore your dead to life.
But perhaps I can give you justice in the name of our king.
Hey everyone, today we're doing things a little bit differently. I've got a couple of my friends here, Joey and Brian. Say hello.
Hello.
Hey, this is Joey here.
And today we're going to start our rewatch series of Season 1, Episode 1. So we've all seen the series. We've seen all the way up through Season 6, obviously. But now that we're going back through the seasons, we're catching things that we didn't see initially. What did you guys notice as you're starting to rewatch Episode 1? What were the things that kind of, you picked up on that you may have not picked up on beforehand?
It was actually really surreal to go back and start the series all over again in Season 1 for me. And the reason is because I didn't realize how many storylines were actually kicked off in the very first episode. I mean, we see everything from Bran's injury to the White Walkers to the Targaryen, over in the Targaryen, Daenerys and his brother, is it Viserys? Viserys, sorry. Viserys, called Drogo, and I mean, so many little things that knowing everything we know now through Season 6, that we never really concentrated or focused that much on. I missed a ton of information as well.
Yeah, whenever I was watching it the second time, a lot of people I've read were like, oh, it's so painful to go back and watch it when you know how many people are going to die or what their fate is or whatever. I'm completely opposite of that. I, in the very beginning, was so excited to we just love fantasy in my home. So this was just this big, grand, epic film or show. And there were so many things coming at you, like Brian was saying. And so it was kind of hard to focus on every single thing. So rewatching it gave me a chance to notice some subtleties that just blew right past me, did the first time. And I've got several of them. I've got some notes here. Okay. But I think if you wanted to, we don't have to go chronologically, but if you wanted to start from the front, and maybe you know this, Harpy, I have no clue what the three Night Watchmen's names were, and I know their significance was to sort of introduce the White Walkers and the Wildlings and what's north of the Wall and the dangers and everything there. Mm-hmm. But who were they, and does it even matter?
Yeah, I think offhand, I think it was like Waymar Royce. I may be wrong on that one, but also Garrett, if that was his name. But there's three of them, and basically what they're doing is the very first book of Game of Thrones. Did you find it on your computer, actually?
I have Sir Waymar Royce.
Yeah, Waymar Royce.
And Garrett.
Will and Garrett. Okay. In every book, I know you guys haven't read the series, but A Song of Ice and Fire, every single book has a prologue. And the prologue has its own plot line to basically start out the narration of the books. Each prologue is very important, and usually at the end of the prologue, the main character or the characters that are involved, one of them usually dies. I think that's kind of the way that A Song of Ice and Fire has been laid out. And yeah, basically they're arranging north of the Wall, and of course, the Night's Watch itself has been around for thousands of years. And now they're really starting to dwindle, and it's just really an opening scene to kind of just set the setting.
Well, on that note, you can kind of tell why they're dwindling, because it's a horrible atmosphere that they are living in, and they're also very arrogant. And again, I don't know which character was which, but the one guy was very arrogant. The guy that ended up getting beheaded later for being a deserter, he was very scared. And but it was a great way to be introduced to the show, because it was very scary to see the wildlings dismembered and arranged in some symbol. And Brian, didn't you say do you know what the symbol means, or did you just you were curious about what it was?
I honestly don't think that the symbol has a meaning, but I had to go back and pause it and look at that and say, where have I seen that before? Have I seen that elsewhere in the series? Is that just a common design, or is that something that bears any kind of importance in the series?
Well, for the record, I'm referencing Game of Thrones wikia.com just so I can follow along with the episode. And all it says right here is they were just arranged in a strange ritualistic fashion on the ground. It doesn't specify. But the aerial shot looking down, you could clearly see it was a symbol of something.
Yeah, I've done a couple of videos where I've kind of explained a little bit about the symbolism behind, what the White Walkers do, what the Children of the Forest do. And one of the main things is White Walkers, their whole dynamic, their whole species basically is meant to be interpreted in a way that they're just not these evil zombie ice creatures. they actually have they have certain characteristics to them where they have royalty within their own ranks. If you watch, is it season 2 or season 3? I believe it's season 3, and this is going way ahead, but when you see Sam actually kill the White Walker, he's protecting...
I'm plugging my ears. I don't want to hear that. I want to wait till we get to that episode.
Oh, okay.
I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
You can tell that, the thing is White Walkers, they put these bodies in different patterns and symbols, and it's just to show that it's an intelligent race of their own. They're an intelligent race of their own. They're not just some crazy sadistic creatures that don't have any thought or comprehension of what's going on around them. There's clearly a motive behind the White Walkers and the threat that they...
Right. That was one of the things that I first originally thought when I watched the series in the very beginning the first time. And, the first thing that comes to mind is mindless savage. But when you see the design and really why they let the deserter go. The one guy that did escape, they had the opportunity to kill him.
Yeah, it was sending a message.
They wanted
him to go back and tell the others.
I said, hey, there's a whole different race out there.
Can I throw a completely different grenade into this conversation right quick? Mm-hmm. And this is a realization I had, and I think it's common. It's not like I had this light bulb grand epiphany, and I know George R.R. Martin didn't write it this way, but this is HBO. What if this is a world like in Westworld? What if this is a separate... I don't know what they would call it. It wouldn't be called Game of Thrones world. It would be called medieval world or fantasy world or whatever. But in the opening credits, when you see the whole steampunk, when you see the steampunk maps and all of that,
yes,
that instantly went through my mind. I was like, oh my gosh, that really reminds me of Westworld. Just looking at that. I don't know. I don't want to derail it that far if you think I'm crazy. But what do you think? I mean, have you heard stuff about that before?
The beginning, the intro. Of how it zooms in on the different locations that you're going to see during that episode.
Right, but have you ever heard any theory of Game of Thrones and Westworld?
Oh yeah, I've actually made a video because George R.R. Martin himself took out the showrunners of Westworld in Santa Fe, New Mexico, actually, where George R.R. Martin lives. And he made the suggestion, he said, wouldn't it be really funny if at the end of Westworld... we find out, or at the end of the whole series, because Westworld is apparently going to be like that next big HBO show that carries on for at least 5 or more seasons, right? Basically, George R. R. Martin said, I'm going to call it now. They're going to create a narrative where really wealthy guests can pay to go.
Game of Thrones style.
Yeah, it's going to be Game of Thrones. You're going to see Jon Snow, and Jon Snow is going to be nothing more than just a bot, a robot. Just a host. Exactly. Can I move on real quick just to address that intro part that you're talking about? It's really interesting if you go frame by frame when you're watching any of the intros. You can watch any season, any episode of the series. Watch the first couple minutes when it takes that 2-3 minute long intro. If you go frame by frame, you can actually see a lens scroll through, and you're looking through the point of view of glasses. And these glasses look exactly the same as the pair of glasses or the spectacles that the Maester in the front area, the reception area of the Citadel in Season 6, when Sam arrives with Gilly and Baby Sam, when he gets there, you can actually see the Maester using the same exact type of spectacles that are being viewed on the intro of the series. So it's really interesting that the very first episode of Season 1 connects all the way to material that most people would have completely dropped or forgotten by this point in time, all the way in Season 6. So it's really interesting that they're carrying that lore all the way through.
The Citadel is that big, elaborate, enormous library. It's where all the scrolls and all the books and
it's basically the university for all the scholars, which is the Maesters in Westeros.
Right. Well, I don't want to meander too far off the path by throwing that Westworld thing out there. I kind of apologize because so far we've only gotten past the opening with the 3 Night's Watchmen, but
not a problem.
I had such I've got a bunch of questions here, but I had this realization that knowing what we know now and going back and seeing it, even though Jon Snow was really, really disrespected by everyone as the bastard. He got no respect at all. If you watch it carefully, he is prepping Arya and Bran. He's prepping them for the future, almost as if he knows something or was traveling back in time or forward. I don't know. But and when it came to the first example is when they were going to behead the deserter, Jon Snow is in Bran's ear right behind him. He says, "Don't look away. He'll know if you do."
I actually caught on to that as well. I thought that it was really interesting. Something I wanted to bring up as we were talking today is the fact that Jon does say that to Bran. And it almost sounds like, spoiler alert, if you haven't gone all the way through season 6 yet, then you probably shouldn't be watching this video unless you just don't care about spoilers. But if you're already aware and you're already caught up, then you know that Jon Snow's real father is not Eddard Stark. It's actually, according to HBO, it's Rhaegar Targaryen. They actually released an infographic after season 7 ended, I believe. Or sorry, season 6, that connected Jon Snow and Rhaegar Targaryen as his father. And Lyanna Stark, Ned Stark's or Eddard Stark's sister, is Jon's real mother. So it's really interesting that Jon said that to Bran, because it's almost as if, Eddard probably has a very traditional way, or he had a very traditional way of raising his children. And that wasn't left on the table when it came to raising Jon, even though Jon wasn't his true heir. And it even gives a lot more almost like value to Jon's character, or to Eddard's character, because Ned didn't even tell his wife. He didn't even tell her over the whole lifespan of Jon Snow, which is 16, 17 years old at that point. He'd never even told her that it wasn't really his son, and that he never cheated on her. Because Eddard got back from Robert's rebellion. Robert Baratheon was the king. He came back to Winterfell. Eddard came back to Winterfell with a new baby. And Catelyn had Robb Stark. So Robb Stark was born towards the end of Robert's rebellion. So Robb Stark and Jon Snow are exactly the same age almost. I mean, almost to the T or whatever. They're the same year.
Are you saying that they tried to trick Catelyn into thinking she had twins or something?
No.
Wouldn't she know if another baby came out of her?
She lived the rest of her life thinking that her husband, who is known for being like one of the most honorable men in Westeros, she thought that he literally cheated on her and had a bastard with someone else.
It was a wet nurse, right?
Well, he always pawned it off as some wet nurse from Starfall. And Starfall
I
is
follow
located
you now.
in Dorne.
I'm sorry, I was ribbing at you there a little bit.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, sorry. Anyways, continue.
Well, something else I noticed about that, and I think I'm right about this. I don't think it was Ned that did this, but two things about Needle. First of all, Jon Snow presented Arya with Needle. Mm-hmm. He gave her the sword. And this was shortly after Bran was terrible at archery practice, and Arya hit a bullseye, and where'd that come from? Well, she obviously wasn't good at sewing, and that's the one thing I picked up is when Sansa had this beautiful needlework and the maiden or whatever complimented her on it, and then Arya struggling with hers. And I know a lot of you out there already knew this, and it's insignificant and very obvious because they explain it like not 5 minutes later in the episode. But when I saw that, I was like, light bulb went off. I was like, oh, okay, so she hates girly girl things. She's a little warrior, and that's why she named her sword Needle. And at the same time, Jon gave it to her. And Jon, Arya, Bran, they're obviously very integral characters in the storyline. So,
yeah, it's actually quite interesting to see. What was it that Jon Snow said? Stick him with a pointy end.
And she knows I know how to use it or something like that.
Yeah.
Or I know how to use it.
Yeah, he basically said she couldn't behead anyone with it, but she could do a lot of damage. And then he teased her, stick her with the pointy end.
I think it was it's a few episodes after this, episodes 3 or 4, where they're in King's Landing. And was it King's Landing where she got the dancing master lessons? Mm-hmm. And then that's when, I think her father actually arranged that, right?
Yes. Eddard Stark paid Syrio Forel, which was the former First Sword of Braavos, to train Arya to become adept at using her sword, which, goes 6 seasons later, and she's obviously still using Needle. And
she lost it for some time, then she got it back.
I'm going to have to be the bad guy and keep calling y'all back to Series 1, Episode 1, aren't I?
Oh,
yeah, I'm sorry about that. Also, another thing, if you keep getting upset that we're moving ahead, it's because we've already watched the whole series.
Oh, me? Are we really going to throw down? Am I going to turn this table over?
No, there is one little piece of interesting note here, and that is that we're just sitting there talking about Syrio Forel. Syrio Forel was the subject of Harpy's very first video on his channel.
Is that true?
That's true. Yeah,
that was awesome. That's cool trivia.
Big theory video about Syrio Forel possibly being Jaqen H'ghar. It's one of the biggest theories out there. Everybody wants it to be true.
Oh, I could see that though easily.
I
mean,
saying
it's not true though.
Well, it's certainly a theory that most likely is not going to pan out before the end of the series. It's something that's we're probably going to be left wondering. If we really mashed these things together, we could probably see a way in which the producers wanted us to assume that Syrio Forel and Jack and Hagar were the same people, but it doesn't really seem that way. They had plenty of opportunities to bring them back, even in season 6. But let's not go too far ahead.
Well,
that's not even in episode 1. We don't even know who Syrio Forel is in episode 1. We've never seen him,
right?
And he doesn't come on until
anything
later.
That's this elaborate, with dozens of main characters or dozens of important characters, and there's going to be a lot of loose ends and things that just couldn't be pursued because there wasn't time for it. I mean, even if you have 8 seasons of 10 apiece, and I know seasons 7 and 8 are planned to only have 6 or 7, 8 episodes. But the point is, if you're going to be doing dozens of episodes, even though you have that much time, you still have to get to the point and keep people entertained. But that's why, as fans, there's a lot of subjectivity. A lot of people see different things. A lot of people pick up on different things. That's why we all like different characters and different storylines. And unfortunately, the reality is there's going to be a lot of, no matter how smart George R.R. Martin is, there's going to be a lot of things that just go unfinished, basically, in the minds of some of the viewers and fans. Yeah,
for sure. And that's why, there's people out there that are creating their own, small companion books for some of these smaller subplots in the story. Because if you read A Song of Ice and Fire, it's laid out like a history book. I mean, each chapter is from somebody else's point of view. So, you'll read a book and, there's a whole huge chapter just about John and everything that John ponders. All of his words, all of the things that he thinks about, all of the history that he thinks back to, and all of this. And it's just another way that they kind of, of course, they're never going to be able to have enough time to put every little thing that you love about the books into the TV show. And that's why now there are some huge and vast differences between the two different fandoms, between the books and the TV show.
I've got a couple more notes here, and one of them, I'm just a Jon Snow lover, obviously.
Mm-hmm. I think everybody is.
That's what I picked up a lot of, though, in episode 1, and one of the main things is the dire wolf, and that's pretty important. I know it's very symbolic because the elk, what is it?
Stag.
The stag.
Okay.
So the stag was killed, and so was the dire wolf, and they pulled part of the stag's antlers out of the dire wolf, right? And they were all like, oh, they shouldn't be on this far south or whatever. There shouldn't be dire wolves here. And they were all, Theon Greyjoy was about to just, they were going to slaughter the dire wolves.
Yes.
And it was Jon who had, the sharpness of mind to say, hey, there's one here for every one of the Stark children. There's 5. And it's the sigil of your house.
Yeah, that's no coincidence. I mean, he just identified it right off the bat. There's 5 Stark children. There are 5 direwolf pups. This is your house sigil. It's not a coincidence. This is fate.
And he played on Ned Stark's ego. Mm-hmm. But that's, again, where I'm telling you how Jon is really, no matter how much disrespect he gets, he's really kind of he's manipulating quite a bit of the characters in the storyline. In setting it up for what we know kind of now. In my opinion, that's just what I kind of see.
But then again, the way you say it, you're right. Jon Snow does have, he's a very impactful character, obviously. A lot of people would say that the title Song of Ice and Fire refers to Jon's birth, Jon's life in general, because he's a perfect cross between ice and fire. He's half Targaryen, half Stark. You've got your ice and fire right there. And a lot of people also say, maybe the title Song of Ice and Fire actually refers to the love between Rhaegar and Lyanna. And then, as a result, Jon Snow was born, and then he is in the top 2. If you wanted to say who is the absolute main character of Game of Thrones, I guess according to the TV show, probably Tyrion Lannister in a way, because, Peter Dinklage was the first actor that was ever cast for any of the roles. He didn't even really have to audition. The producers already knew who they wanted.
He's seriously a brilliant actor, Dinklage. And he plays Tyrion just so well. Just amazing.
Yeah, I agree. Couldn't imagine going back and seeing a different actor in that role, or any of the roles, to be honest. I've kind of fallen in love with all of the portrayals of these characters. And it's funny because some of these characters have had 3 or more people portray them in all different seasons. You know, the Mountain, for instance, has been recast 3 times. A lot of people will be like, yeah, I can see the difference between the season 1 guy and, you know, the season 6 guy, but really between seasons 1 through 3, I believe there was 3 different actors. And the second actor who played the Mountain, for instance, was also the same guy who played one of the giants. I think he was the same guy who played 1-1.
Really?
You know, yeah. This guy's like a giant. I believe he's like 7 feet tall in real life, and so he.
Do you know that giant had? Sorry to interrupt, but that brother had a giant who was really into ballet.
Really?
And it was named Tutu.
Yeah, you know, I was talking earlier about, you know, all the storylines that start, and you know, when you go back and you watch that first episode again, what really caught me was, you know, here you've got Jon Arryn is dead, the Hand of the King. You have Robert Baratheon and his entire royal entourage coming up from King's Landing to Winterfell, and they're going to he's looking to Ned Stark as the new Hand. And what's interesting is, you know, they're there, they have their big feast, then all of a sudden, Rider in the Night, you know, hey, it's from the sister, it's saying Jon Arryn was murdered, right. You know, and I mean, it's just so many. It's like the whole first episode is, you know, and then with Bran, you know, Bran climbing the wall, or climbing the tower, sorry, and getting pushed out by Jaime Lannister, you know, just starts so many little things. And then us as the viewer, we also see how...
Well, round one, sorry to, on round one viewing of this, a lot of the stuff just went right over your head, but now we know, you go back and look, Cersei and Jaime, in their dialogue, were flat out telling us as a viewer what was going on between them, and everyone knew,
right,
or most everyone knew, and I can't remember the exact dialogue, but they're, you know, like you just said, what was the guy's name that died?
Jon Arryn.
Jon Arryn, the Hand of the King.
Right, so Jon Arryn's down there, and he's laid out on the table or whatever, and Cersei's looking over the railing, and Jaime comes walking up, and they have their little banter, you know, they have their conversation up there, and that's when they basically tell us that they're lovers, you know, but it just goes right over our head until about 10, 15 minutes later in the episode when we actually see it.
When we actually see it.
When Bran sees it.
When Bran discovers it.
Yeah. And there's a couple of other things, and in playing on the ego of these guys, especially Ned Stark, actually Robert Baratheon, as a matter of fact, he comes to Winterfell, and he's real cool, calm, and collected, and he's got everyone with him, everyone's watching, right? But in so many words, he is basically there, kind of like, you got to help me, man. There's something going on. They're out to get me. This is bad. And he's just calmly, coolly asking him to be the Hand of the King. And he's like, well, join our houses and everything. But it's because there was something brewing. You know, the Lannister coup or the Lannister takeover or whatever. If that's who was going to try to take everything over. But we know it's Game of Thrones. Somebody's always trying to deceive someone else. And there's always someone trying to go for that Iron Throne. But, I mean, he even down in the Keep, whenever he was looking at his wife that had passed away, when Robert Baratheon was down there looking at the statue of his wife.
Well, it was actually not his wife. He was betrothed to Lyanna Stark for quite a while. This is back way before Robert's Rebellion. This is before there was ever that incident.
So they were never married? That was just someone he was in love with?
Yeah. They were never married. The Starks and the Baratheons have had an alliance for quite some time. And Eddard Stark, as well as Robert Baratheon, they actually lived up at the Vale for quite a while and grew up under Jon Arryn. Long story short, Robert Baratheon has always been in love with Lyanna Stark. Right. He's also been in love with prostitutes and drinking and feasting and ruling the kingdom and basically having everyone bend their will towards his own. So it's something that people are, you know, everybody knows this about Robert Baratheon. Robert Baratheon, you can hear in season 1, Cersei says, the dead can wait. We've been on the road for a month. We've been on the King's Road, because it took literally a month to get from King's Landing all the way up to Winterfell.
Right.
But Robert's like, no, that's the first respect that I pay when I get to Winterfell.
It's the only person he's ever loved. And later on in the season, and we'll get to it, but Cersei tells Ned after... Robert might be after Robert's death. I'm not sure if it's right before or right after, but Cersei literally says, I was in love with Robert at one point, you know, and when he would make love to me, he would be so drunk, he would call out Lyanna's name. So I was sleeping with him, but he was
His heart was elsewhere.
His heart was on a dead person, basically.
Right.
And she's never really like
Well,
that.
she's
Because
not-
Cersei grew up thinking that she was going to marry Rhaegar Targaryen, believe it or not.
Yeah.
Because Tywin Lannister was the hand of the king to the Mad King for over 20 years.
Yep.
But Cersei doesn't really care. She's into Jaime. She's into anything that's going to get her that throne.
And I think that's part of it, though. The whole thing with Baratheon and his devotion to Lyanna, I think that's part of Cersei's rage and the whole basic idea that she's with Jaime and and all that good stuff.
Okay. Yeah.
Hey, I got a couple. Do you have any other questions? I mean, I wrote down a lot because I was like, I was really into this because backstory on me.
Mm-hmm.
I just got into Game of Thrones in December of 2016.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
That's right. You guys just kind of
we binge watched all
it.
6 seasons over Christmas break.
Wow.
My wife and my daughter. My wife
Kudos.
has shut down for she has a shutdown for her job where they're off the same amount of time as the kids are
Yeah.
on their school break. And so we would sit there and we would just blow through 3 to 5 episodes a night.
Yeah.
And so, watching it that way,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of things can just go right over your head. But at the same time, there's other things that I might follow and key on because I'm watching them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in a row.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of a hard way to watch a show. Like, there's other things that we've watched where when you binge watch it, you're like, oh, man, this... And then you stick with it because you're committed, but you're like, the character is weak, the casting, the writing, blah, blah, blah. But Game of Thrones, man, I just kept... Want to do another? We'd look at each other. Let's do another. Hey, it's time to go to bed. No, let's just do one more.
Yep.
I mean, it was that good.
Yeah.
What other questions do we have based on the first episode? Anything that you were kind of like, what exactly did that mean, or what was their intention there? Or
Well-
something that maybe you were like, finally, the first time I saw this, I had no idea what this was in reference to,
I've got
but
a
now
couple.
it's clear.
I've got a couple, but most of mine are observations instead of questions.
Okay.
But Brian, you go first if you have something. I'm looking something up here right quick.
One question I had. Let me just get this straight because is Benjen, is he Ned Stark's younger brother?
Correct.
Okay, and I just wanted to make sure. Now he's first ranger for the Night Watch,
He is the first ranger for the Night's Watch.
starting out. Okay.
Starting out, yeah. Until he
And-
disappears,
until he
of course.
disappears,
And
and
they got to
then-
refill his position.
Okay. Now, and you know what? There's so many characters in that get introduced right off the bat, and there's very memorable characters such as Tyrion and the Starks and Robert Baratheon and Cersei and of course Joffrey. But there's a lot of really important characters that you don't really get to know as well until later on. And is it Maester Aemon that's up at
Maester Aemon?
Yeah, and he's blind, right?
Yeah. And Peter Vaughn is the actor who portrayed Maester Aemon, and rest in peace to that gentleman because he just passed away. I
he really
believe,
did in
a
real
couple
life.
months ago.
Okay.
Maybe 2 months ago he passed away. But Maester Aemon, the actor, was blind,
Really?
as well as the character. I believe so. Yeah.
That's an interesting piece of.
Well, Brian, when you brought up Benjen, that was one of my observations also.
Yeah.
And because Benjen, he comes back later and he looks. Well, I don't want to skip ahead. Benjen, Brian, like you brought up Benjen earlier, and it made me think of this. It says he arrives for the feast or whatever at Winterfell, and Jon is just chomping at the bit to go with him. He's like, "I want to go. I'm ready to go be on the Night's Watch. I want to
Right.
join the Night's Watch." And Benjen tells him, that it's hard, it's cold, it's
not all
terrible,
it's cracked up to
terrible. You're not going to like it, and he goes, "You'll never have a son."
Yeah.
And Jon says he doesn't care, and Benjen tells him, "You might if you knew what it meant." And I was like,
That's a good point. I heard that, but I didn't hear it. That I missed that one even on this.
Right, you
most
heard it, but
recent-
it didn't register
click.
anything? Right.
It didn't click, and when Jon Snow goes off to the Night Watch and Ned Stark heads down to King's Landing, they have that famous little conversation. Next time we see each other, we're going to talk about your mother. And of course, that never comes later down the road. We don't know that yet. Watching the episode, but is that episode 1 or 2? I can't remember.
No, that's episode 1, I
Is it?
believe.
Okay.
Yeah, because by the end of episode 1, Robert and Ned leave for King's Landing, as well as Sansa.
No, because Doesn't Bran gets pushed out the window by Jaime
That's
Lannister
the
at
very, very end. But right before
Yeah,
that...
right as soon as he hits the ground, it fades to black, credits roll. I mean, that's the very crescendo of the first episode.
But right before that, you can hear Eddard Stark and Robert Baratheon are on their horses, and little young Bran is standing there next to one of the walls of Winterfell, right next to his direwolf, Summer, and he's looking at his father, and his father, Eddard Stark, kind of gives him like the nod, kind of like, be a good kid or whatever, and he kind of smiles at his dad, and his dad leaves.
Oh yeah, because it's really bad. I'm telling you, there is that's the winter is coming, and that's bad in their world. And that's when he tells back to the call back to the very, very, very beginning where they behead the guy, and he's like, well, is it true? Bran and Ned is like, Bran to Ned was saying, is it true what he said about the White Walkers? And he's like, there haven't been White Walkers for thousands of years. And he's like, so he was lying? Ned didn't answer the question. He just says, madman sees what a madman sees. I'm paraphrasing. But he didn't say the guy was lying. He just said they haven't been around for thousands of years. So he was in denial because he knew some bad stuff was coming. He just didn't know what.
Well, typical with Northmen, anybody in the North, they usually pray to the old gods, and the old gods, they're the same gods as the old gods of the forest. The old gods of the forest is like the religion that the children of the forest follow. The children of the forest created the White Walkers, and because of that, that's a lot of the time why you're going to see symbolism of the children of the forest. Like if you look at the weirwood tree and the spiral of like how they've got their rocks and everything laid out. In the same way, the White Walkers, they'll cut up horses and wildlings or crows or black brothers from the Night's Watch, and that's why they all look very similar because they're all coming from one focused point of the plot line or whatever.
Speaking of White Walkers and Children of the Forest, one thing that I had completely forgotten about from the first round is the little blue-eyed girl that the deserter comes across. And, I love horror films in general, so when I saw that, I thought, how delightfully creepy this is. And
how delightfully creepy this is.
It was just amazing. I was like, man, that needs to be like the background on my cell phone or something.
At first, when you see her, there's a little bit of a stinger, like like a ring. It's a production thing where they kind of scare you. And I didn't know if it was a zombie or if it was alive or what, but it was the girl hanging on the tree. Yeah. Well, I know you probably got a little more to comment on that, but they go back and all the wildlings are gone and everything. But then. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter, but she was darn creepy.
Episode 1 is just really reflects on kind of the introduction to magic coming back into the world. Dragons have been dead for 150 years. Direwolves haven't been spotted south of the wall for forever. Same thing with White Walkers. Those things were just legend that are told to little kids like Bran Stark.
And maybe the idea, and I don't mean to cut you off, and maybe the idea of the White Walkers are so far-fetched, that might be the purpose of the message via the deserter. Don't know if that's true. But.
Yeah, and the thing is Game of Thrones, like we've kind of already mentioned, is there's so much foreshadowing. And you don't catch on to all of it until you go back through the series because you'll start to know, like everybody knows, the current threat of White Walkers at the end of Season 6. Everybody's like, you know what, maybe we need to focus all of our fighting not on each other, and just trying to build enough manpower to stand a chance against this unstoppable army. That, if one person dies against the White Walkers, well, guess what? That's one more person added to their army.
Right, every person.
So it's an exponential growth of just destruction.
Right, every person they kill becomes a White Walker, so it's an army.
Well, it becomes a white, and that's another thing that we should explain, because obviously...
Yeah, please do. Is there a difference between a white and a White Walker?
Yes, yeah. So a white is simply a dead person who was resurrected, and now they are basically mindless zombies. These things are really mindless zombies, but they're not like Zombieland. They're not like the typical ones you would see in video games. This is more of like a 28 days later type of thing. These zombies move fast, they'll run, they'll sprint at you, and we've even seen in later seasons that some of these whites can be reduced all the way down to just skeletons, and they can still pose a threat. They can still pose a threat to humans.
Yeah, they kind of look
White Walkers, on the other hand, what we are aware of now, and they're referred to as the others in the novels. They're not really referred to as White Walkers, but as far as we know, White Walkers are actually Craster's sons. So do you remember, fast forward a little ways into the series, and you know how the Night's Watch goes north? And this is when Jeor Mormont is the Lord Commander of the Night's Watch, and everyone goes north, and they meet Gilly, right? They meet Gilly.
Right.
Gilly has a child. It's a baby boy, but they don't sacrifice the baby boy to the White Walkers, but normally they do. Normally, if Craster, that wildling, that guy that...
You're talking about that yucky dude that molested his own daughters?
Yeah, all of those daughter wives that he has.
Right.
Anytime he has a son, he offers them to the White Walkers. The White Walkers spare their lives and take these baby boys. These baby boys are turned into White Walkers. So any White Walkers you see around, if you read back in the novels, those daughters of Craster, those daughter wives or whatever, they always refer to as the White Walkers as Craster's sons. So they're really just Craster's son. So whites are dead people that have been resurrected. Mm-hmm. White Walkers, as far as we know, are Craster's sons that were living and then were turned into White Walkers from the Night King during their little ritual. And you can see how they laid that little baby out on the ice, you know. So
But
there's a
hundreds
clear
of thousands
difference.
of them, or tens of thousands of them. I mean,
Only whites. Whites, there's hundreds of thousands.
so you tell me
or
the
whatever.
White Walkers, there maybe only be like 20?
White Walkers
30?
are almost kind of like the lieutenants in the army. You know what I'm saying? Like they're
Right.
like the captains, if you will. They lead their own groups of whites. They've got a brain. They have strategy. They have a regalness to them.
Well, I
they
guess with
wear
the-
armor. If
With
you
the
will.
dozen daughters, I guess you could probably pump out 100 of those, right?
Probably.
Okay.
It's possible, but we've only seen about a dozen of them total. And the biggest number of White Walkers that you can ever see in the show is when the Night King is coming over and he's walking over, and it shows that fortress, almost that big mountain way up in the north, that it looks like
yeah,
a White
yeah.
Walker castle almost.
Yeah.
Well, they take that baby, that White Walker grabs the baby, that Craster's son that was sacrificed. He takes him all the way north, and then he puts him on this big ice block surrounded by this ice circle full of big icicles or whatever. And then you can see, like, literally it's the Night King and 12 disciples. I mean, that's exactly what it looks like. This isn't episode 1, but this is kind of all the material evidence surrounding the idea that White Walkers are actually Craster's sons that were somehow matured. Now, we don't know if the Night King touches the baby's forehead, the eyes turn blue, and then automatically he grows into a 6.5 foot tall White Walker. We don't know if it takes 10 years for the baby to become a full-size White Walker. We don't know that process yet, but we do know there's a clear difference between whites and White Walkers.
Right.
Now, the little blue-eyed girl in the beginning, she would clearly be a white. Is that correct?
Yeah.
That's what it says. Yeah, right here it's well, I'm stay where I'm at, but yeah, it says the white wildling.
Yeah.
So, hey, new theory though, that castle you were talking about, that maybe that is a little nod to Frozen. Maybe that's Elsa's castle up there.
I kind
Could
of
be one way to connect those two worlds, I
Superman's-
guess.
I was kind of thinking bed and breakfast, but hey.
And it's hard to tell if it's just like the way the mountains are built or if it is really a fortress. But I think it's intended to make it seem like, that's just another way to add evidence that, the White Walkers aren't just some mindless zombies. They've got motive. They've got instincts.
I appreciate you clearing that up, because there is a difference. And I don't think the White Walker... You can clearly see the difference between the people who have been turned into, zombies, walkers, whatever you want to call them. You can see the difference between the Night King or the Night's King and, his...
Yeah, so in the show,
His-
it's the
his
Night King.
ilk.
The
Yeah.
Night's King, when you say Night's King, that's actually a completely different character. That is just a legend. It's based on a true story and everything, but as far as we know, it dates all the way back to almost the beginning of the Night's Watch.
Right.
And it was a former Lord Commander who went north of the wall, found a girl that he fell in love with, and guess what? This girl had pale white skin and blue eyes. So
Elsa.
she was...
It was Elsa.
Yeah, it was.
And he fell in love with her, and he took over the Night Fort, which used to be the main castle for the Night's Watch back in the day. And it's actually left in ruins now. Bran and Mira Reed and all of them, they stay in it, like I think in Season 3 or Season 4, when they're near the wall. They actually stay in the Night Fort for a night to bunker down and take shelter. But yeah, the Night's King is actually a guy that went crazy and started like torturing his own people for like literally a dozen years. And then a legendary House Stark leader named Brandon the Breaker. And this guy united with the king beyond the wall. That means the king of the free folk, the king of the wildlings. This guy was known as Joramun. They grouped together and they basically destroyed the Night's King. And they restored the full order, original order of the Night's Watch.
Gotcha. I got to hand it to you, Harpy. You're definitely packed chock full of Game of Thrones information.
Absolutely.
We've talked for quite a bit here, and I'd say we're about 95% Westeros. Mm-hmm. Can I just interject a little bit of Essos into the conversation?
Yeah, let's talk about it.
Absolutely, let's do it. Yeah.
I only have one note about it,
Yeah.
but it was just enough in the episode. First of all, if you don't mind, I'm going to just go ahead and claim right now that Daenerys is one of my top characters for many reasons. Not only is she beautiful, but she's just kick ass.
Yeah, I'll
She's
second
really
that.
cool, and I've got to say at the same time, her brother Viserys. I hate that guy, by the way. So
Viserys?
No, so spoiler alert if you haven't seen it. His fate, yay! I applauded. But anyway,
I threw a party.
I wish I would have taken a screenshot or taken a better note on this, but it is pretty clear. Viserys was gross about his sister. By the way, he thinks he's going to take the throne, and he's using his sister as the way to get there.
Right.
With the tribe.
The Dothraki?
The Dothraki, thank you. So he's just going to give his sister up, and he says, I don't care if all 40,000 of them and their horses have sex with you. I'm going to get... And that just disgusted me. It disgusted her too, quite frankly.
You could see that look on her
Yeah,
face.
or lack of look. She just went blank.
Yeah, she just went blank. I
Yeah.
remember that.
And you know what's funny is there's obviously a lot of nudity and a lot of adult content in Game of Thrones. I mean, it's obviously a TV mature rating.
The beginning says not for children.
Yeah.
All right.
And a lot of people say that the first episode is just zombies, sex, and blood. Or
Oh, my.
whatever, you know, and then that kind of thing, and it sets a standard for the rest of the series. But you're right. You know, Viserys was a terrible person, and the thing that you have to know is that he always called himself the last dragon. He believed that just like the Targaryens before him, he had the control, even though dragons at this point in the story are long dead. He believed that because of his blood and everything, that he was this last dragon, that he was invincible, that he was untouchable. And obviously his sister Dany, you can see her in the first episode. She goes into her warm bath after Viserys takes off her clothes.
Yeah,
and you
you're
can see
absolutely
that
right.
one of her handmaidens or whatever,
That's a tip to something to come.
Yeah.
go up to her and say, "Oh, my lady," or
It's
whatever.
too hot.
It's way too hot.
Yeah.
And she doesn't listen to her. And obviously it's...
And that's another thing that just flies right over your head because you think she's just in the spa to get the yuckiness of what's about to happen. Like she's just in the hot water to cleanse herself, but yet it's because she kind of has a special power.
And she's becoming rebellious because she's starting to notice that, you know, her brother isn't what he believes he is, but she is. She is the last dragon.
He calls himself the last dragon. He believes that, if you say it enough, you'll believe it.
Oh, yeah.
You'll think, if you tell that lie long enough.
And it's not just Viserys' fault. It's not like he's unique from the rest of his family. He's no different than, the corrupt Targaryens that ruled the Iron Throne for 300 straight years.
Yeah,
So-
see, he's mad because they're in Essos now. They lost Westeros to the Lannisters, essentially.
Well, to the Baratheons.
Well, to the Baratheons. And
And the Lannisters, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
the Lannisters, and that's another reason that back in episode 1, when Eddard Stark and Catelyn are woken up, or Maester Luwin comes into the chamber and was like, "Hey, can I come in?" And he gives the note about Jon Arryn, it was murder and all of this. And it's like, everybody knows the Lannisters have a rich history of just destroying anyone in their path.
Yeah.
Because they're the richest family in Westeros at the time.
they're also the most in debt.
Well, they've funded over like half the crown because the Iron Bank of Braavos is the one who the crown itself was in millions of dollars of debt.
Before we go too far, I want to drop something in.
Oh,
here
yeah,
right
let's
quick.
go ahead and-
You're talking about Viserys, talking about how he's the last dragon with that blood or whatever.
Uh-huh.
I think that this subject matter is a nod to what Benjen was telling Jon Snow it might if you knew what it meant about not having a son. Because isn't there a possibility that, or is it just straight up fact that Jon Snow is a Targaryen?
It is straight up fact according to HBO.
Okay, so then that right there is, I think that's important. You know, we kind of touched on it and then went away from it, but that's when Benjen told him, it's important, dude. you might want to think about having a kid, but if it's meant to be, the gods, whether the new gods or the old gods, it's going to happen. George R. Martin writes it, then it's going to happen. But
now, in all reality, who would be older? Would it be Viserys or would it be Jon Snow? I'm just curious.
I thought they were about the same age.
No, Viserys is quite a bit older,
at
least a few years. He was born in King's Landing. Daenerys, on the other hand, was born in Dragonstone, and this is after the Mad King realized that his family was in danger in King's Landing during Robert's Rebellion. So he sent his wife, Rhaella Targaryen, who was pregnant at the time, with Daenerys. He sent her and a young Viserys to Dragonstone. Dragonstone is located in Blackwater Bay, just off the coast of King's Landing, so not very far away.
Right.
It's actually where Stannis Baratheon lives at the beginning of the series.
Okay.
It's where he's the master of ships for the crown, and he's located on Dragonstone. Stannis Baratheon is the second oldest Baratheon brother to Robert Baratheon. So when Robert dies, Stannis has a good claim because he knows that Joffrey and Tommen and Myrcella, he knows that those aren't Robert's kids. He knows those are Jaime's. They didn't want to admit that things were a little weird between Jaime and Cersei, but pretty much everyone else in the realm knows what's going on. And Stannis Baratheon was
anything about
yeah,
it,
Stannis Baratheon. Anyways, long
Tyrion
story short,
brings it up. He makes fun of him. They make fun of him, and he pokes back. He's like,
yeah,
maybe
and that's what Jon Arryn he was onto, wasn't he? At the Citadel investigating.
Well, he wasn't at the Citadel, I don't believe. He had borrowed a book from Grand Maester Pycelle.
That's right.
And it showed all of the bloodlines, and it said, Baratheon, or it said Robert Baratheon, black of hair.
Right.
And then it would say
and then they show all the
Joffrey
blonde-headed
Baratheon,
kids, and it's like,
blonde head. And he notices because he goes to go visit Gendry down at the blacksmith smithing area, and he learns that Gendry is one of Robert's bastards because he realizes that Gendry's mother, Gendry says that I never really knew my mother. I know she sang me songs apparently, but she died when I was really young. Or maybe she didn't die. Maybe he was just separated from her or whatever. I can't remember offhand. You guys can let me know down in the comments, but I know that Gendry tells Eddard Stark as the Hand of the King, he says, my mother was blonde. So he knows that if Cersei and Robert were going to have a child, the Baratheon seed is so strong that the children would most likely come out with all brown or black hair. But all of Cersei's children have blonde hair.
oh, man. Something just popped into my head. I'm so sorry.
Did any of that click for you guys, though?
Yeah. I picked up on. I mean, they were kind of. There's exposition in the shows where they tell you straight to your face what's going on, and sometimes it clicks, or sometimes it doesn't. If you're aware of the storyline, then you're like, But if they're foreshadowing or setting up something for the next episodes down the line, then it's just a side note. It just kind of sits on the side of your brain, and then 2 or 3 episodes down the line, you're like, the epiphany.
Right.
Kind of like in the same episode about Needle, and then 5 minutes later, they explain it. Something interesting happened with Jaime with sort of a little foreshadowing. He said something about, I think he was talking to Tyrion, but he's kind of smarted off about being a man with no... It was foreshadowing him losing his hand later, basically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when he went to...
He reached his hand out. The hand that he loses, I believe. The camera, it was the main thing in the shot. And he said some line.
He was shaking hands with Jon Snow.
Yeah, he was trying to talk crap to Jon Snow.
And he grabbed Jon's hand and brought him close.
Yeah,
right.
Brought him real close and kind of threatened Jon.
I did notice that.
I wonder if I'm reading too much into that, but I think the line of dialogue that went with that was kind of like, haha, sucker. In a couple episodes or next season or whatever. I'm sorry, I don't have it memorized, but yeah, I just thought that was interesting. But
yeah, when the camera just centered right on his right hand for a second, I thought, what's going on here? Because I know that's the hand.
Because you know now,
later.
yeah.
You know, it's really interesting because that's why I like to do these things. I like to go back through the series. But now that season 7's ramping up and they're marketing and they're coming out with new promos and new digital content all the time, it's kind of hard to always go back and remember every little thing that happened in the very beginning.
Honestly, we've talked about so much today. My head's kind of spinning because some characters we left out, and that's okay because we're plot centric on episode 1. Winter is coming, and so it's okay if we didn't talk about some of the other characters. We'll get to know them as we go.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
But I just wanted to throw this out there. I hope that your fans and your subs and everybody likes this format, and I hope that they like us, that you let us be on here. And I wanted to thank you for having me on the podcast, and so I'm looking forward to talking about more of these episodes with you.
Yeah, this conversation actually kind of makes me want to go back again and watch
Episode one
again, just
and
so I
see
can
what
watch
else
through
we
it.
can pull out.
And I'm like, because you guys have put a lot of ideas and thoughts into my head about different scenes and different things that we saw in season one, episode 1. So yeah, I'm probably actually going to go and watch that again, maybe tonight or tomorrow night, to be honest with you.
Well, I know that your fans are very hardcore, and I'm a big fan of Game of Thrones as well, but I know, Harpy, that your fans are hardcore, so I hope that they'll be forgiving if I don't have a photographic memory, and I'm watching the shows, and I have reference here on the computer screen in front of me, but just take it easy on me if I don't get every little detail right. That's what we want you for in the comments section, to say, hey, Joey, you were wrong on this, it's actually this, or hey, Brian, I think what you meant was this, or hey, hopefully we can be productive, but also have an open dialogue where we can interact with the viewers, where they can kind of jump in and let us fill in the gaps for us when we have a blank, we go blank or something like that.
Well, thank you for inviting us here today. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I appreciate you two being here. I really hope the fans enjoyed this longer format. If you guys do, please let me know down in the comments. And as always, have a great day. Take care, and I will see you tomorrow.